Right now? Hello, everyone. Hello. Is it even on? Hello, everyone. We are going to get started. If everyone could please grab your seats, we are going to get started. Folks, please find your seats. We're about to get started.
Thanks so much, Ben. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. I am Debbie Cox Bolton, CEO of the New Deal. And it is my absolute honor to welcome everybody here to Detroit for our 2023 Ideas Summit. So as we get underway, I just wanted to start by thanking a few people. It's so good to see you all friends. I just want to single out and thank, of course, Helen Milby, our visionary founder, our board members, advisory council members, our event sponsors, our donors who are with us all year long, and of course the incredible team at New Deal. This is truly a family and a community, and I'm so grateful to every single one of you for being part of it. So we gather here today in Detroit to kick off this Ideas Summit at a particularly challenging time for our country. The COVID health emergency may be over, but the road to recovery is still long. We still have to deal with the mental and economic impacts people are feeling, and we have to address longstanding inequities so that we can truly rebuild a post-COVID America that works better for everyone. At the same time, we face other massive threats: climate change, the rolling back of women's reproductive rights, continuing attacks on our democracy, and a politics that is too often filled with hate and division. But despite all of that, I want to tell you why I have hope, incredible hope, and why I'm excited to be here with you today. We're also going to preview a couple top-line numbers from a poll that we did talking about how Americans feel about government and democracy. So by far, the first thing that gives me hope is you all. State and local leaders, you are on the front lines of virtually every single issue facing this country, from choice, gun violence, implementing the American Rescue Plan and the recovery, and it's only increasingly becoming true that you are where it's at. State legislators have debated more than 400 bills on our democracy just since January. Mayors and county officials are producing climate action plans and building affordable housing, and literally $350 billion of American Rescue Plan money is flowing through states and localities. So to all the state and local New Deal leaders who are with us today and who are with us around the country, I just want to say thank you. Your passion and your persistence and your innovation and your impact is inspiring, and it gives me hope, and I know it gives everybody in this room hope. It's no accident that we're in Michigan for this Ideas Summit, because state and local leaders in Michigan are playing a critical role, and we have lessons to learn from them. They had the biggest wins in the country last November, as you probably know. picking up all constitutional offices and flipping both chambers of the legislature for the first time in 40 years. And now that they're in power, they're turning their common sense agenda that they campaigned on into a governing platform. They're strengthening democracy and investing in the things that Michiganders care about, like affordable housing and childcare and education and broadband. They're protecting choice and addressing gun violence. So I'm excited to be here in Detroit where we can learn from them about what they did, take those lessons back to where we live. Another reason I am full of hope is because of this historic opportunity we have with the investment that's being made in America thanks to federal funding. Federal funds from the American Rescue Plan are already having an impact across the country, and investments that will be coming and are coming from the bipartisan infrastructure deal and the Inflation Reduction Act will help us pay to fix roads and bridges, to address climate change, ensure Americans have access to clean water and quality internet. And this being Infrastructure Week, I think it's important to just point out that Infrastructure Week is no longer a joke, that we actually have funding to really address it, and that's thanks to the Biden administration. So taken together, that investment in America is really a once-in-a-generation opportunity. We can make a huge difference with state and local leaders leading the way in changing people's lives. So over the next few days, we're going to be talking about some of the best practices of using the use of those federal funds across a variety of issues and see what people can take home. And while it's important that we do that for you here so that we can learn from each other and share with each other, it's equally as important that we're telling these stories to the American people. For decades, Americans have been told that government is the problem, government is the enemy. And I think this has not only undermined Americans' confidence in government, but has set the stage for the attacks on our democracy as a whole. You know, when I went to Washington, D.C. as an intern 30 years ago, I literally remember having my mind blown that there were thousands of people in Washington who woke up every day thinking about how to make people's lives better. And fast forward 30 years later, and working with all of you, I still feel that exact same way. And too many Americans don't understand that, and we have to tell them. To counter the messages that seek to divide us, to undermine the ties that bind us, and the very systems of government and democracy, we've got to double down on telling those stories. The New Deal's committed to doing that. We've been tracking American Rescue Plan funding, and we're going to continue to do that. We have new examples out today I hope you'll take a look at. I think I'm supposed to click a thing here to show you that. So we will keep doing that. Please tell us what you're doing so that we can keep highlighting those great success stories. And another way we'll be doing that this year is also this will be an Ideas Challenge year. So New Deal leaders, we encourage you to tell us what you're doing. We will be partnering again with Governing Magazine for the winners of the Ideas Challenge to be featured there. So earlier I mentioned a poll that we did. This is the first ever New Deal poll that we did in advance of the summit. And I wanted to just tell you a couple things that we learned that I hope will help set the stage for the context for here, and also kind of underscore why I have so much hope. First, we asked people about their feelings about democracy. And we found that democracy remains a huge concern for Americans, and it's actually driving how they vote in the polls. I think I've got some slides here. So nearly half of our respondents to our poll rated American democracy as poor or terrible. And only 25% said good or excellent. That's concerning, to say the least. And across party lines, as it says there, not more than 36% of respondents rated our democracy above average. When it comes to the relationship between our democracy and voting, fully 63% of Americans said that their feelings about democracy influenced their vote in the 2022 elections, with the highest percentage, 48%, saying it influenced their vote a lot, and only 4% saying it did not influence their vote in 2022 at all. So people care, people are worried. And the good news, even better news coming out of our poll, was that there was vast agreement on things that we could do, common sense things that appeal to people across party lines. So 77%, for example, agree that Increasing penalties for people who threaten poll workers should be enacted. 78% agree that people who threaten voters should be penalized. And 65% agree, including a majority of Republicans, that people should be able to register the same day and have their vote count. These are things that were highlighted by our Democracy Working Group in our Democracy Playbook that was released in February, along with other state and local ideas to increase the access to vote, protect our election integrity, and increase civic engagement. I hope you will all check that out. Tomorrow we'll be hearing from one of the co-chairs of that group, Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, who will be telling us what she's doing here with her community partners on all of those fronts. We also wanted to find out about how Americans feel about their government and elected leaders. Probably not surprising, respondents gave pretty low marks when it comes to trust in government at all levels. So what do people want from their elected officials? Sorry, that was another slide you could have seen from this one. 82%, the vast majority, said that they're looking for leaders who can get stuff done. This actually gave me a lot of hope because I work with all of you every day, and that's what I know you are doing. There were nuances in some of this, in that, for example, Republicans said that they would prefer, that they also were looking for someone who's a fighter, where Democrats said that they were looking for more of a consensus builder, but across the board, across party lines, it was by far the overwhelming response was they were looking for people to get stuff done. A challenge to overcome is that people do not know what we're doing. I don't think I'm going to be able to, can someone flip to the next one? Because that's not working anymore. Well, I'll just tell you, you'll have to take my word for it. 45% of respondents, there we go, when we asked, were not aware of a single piece of meaningful legislation that's passed Congress and been signed by the Biden administration in the last 2.5 years, despite us knowing that so much amazing work has been done. And also, when we told them about it and said, these are things that are passed, how does that make you feel about government? Let me see if I've got the numbers here. Only about 40% that made them feel more positive about government, where the rest were unmoved. So importantly, what we're going to need to do is not just tell people what we're doing, but we're going to have to tell them how it affects them, why it should matter to them. So we're going to be talking about that over the next 2 days. How do we tell these successes? How do we clearly communicate the successes and connect those dots? In the coming weeks, we're going to be telling you more information about this poll, but there's 2 clear takeaways. One, that people continue to be concerned about democracy, and we can rebuild confidence with solutions that are popular across party lines. And second, people are clear that they want leaders to focus on results and put progress above politics. That's what you all do every day. That's why we're here. We're going to be talking about those ideas that move the needle. And again, I just want to thank you for being with us. Thank you for all you do every day and for being part of this community. Together, I think we can change people's perceptions about government and about the work that we do, and rebuild those bonds of trust amongst each other as a country. So thank you again for being here with us. So it is my great pleasure now to bring to the stage the next folks who are going to kick us off here. I talked about Michigan Democrats having lessons for all of us Democrats around the country to learn. So we have, I don't think we could have a better panel to kick us off. We have Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist. I think he's here somewhere. As you might know before, hi, so nice to see you. Before serving in office, Lieutenant Governor was a computer scientist. My husband is, yeah, please. So that's something I have to mention. He's been a champion of harnessing technology to solve problems, and we've been grateful to have him as our co-chair of our broadband working group. So thank you, Garland, for being here. Also, I wanted to bring up Senator Mallory McMurrow. I'm sure many of you will know Mallory from a video that went viral a while ago where she brilliantly stood up to a colleague who had accused her of being a groomer and frankly gave all of us a blueprint for how to address and engage in these culture wars. She's also an ardent supporter of policies protecting reproductive rights and empowering local communities and making Michigan a business-friendly and family-friendly state. She's currently serving as Majority Whip in the Senate. Thank you. And our moderator today is going to be Laura Berman, who is an award-winning Detroit-based journalist and writer. She was a featured columnist at the Detroit News for almost 30 years, and she also reported from some very interesting places, including Bosnia, Moscow, and London. So at the Detroit Free Press, where she began her career. She covered politics, business, and she worked as a Sunday magazine writer. So we're so happy, Laura, for you to moderate this, and I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It seemed to happen overnight here in Michigan after many years of sort of being in the wilderness. Over 6 years and 3 election cycles, voters in Michigan turned a state that had been weathered decades of Republican domination into bright, bold blue. A few things that happened in 2018, there was Prop 2, a referendum and constitutional amendment that created a redistricting commission. Another referendum passed enhancing voter rights. And then in 2022, we had an amazing turnabout in terms of the governor and lieutenant governor being reelected resoundingly. The Republican Party essentially implodes, and Democrats win both state houses for the first time in decades, 40 years, 40 years. Secure a new seat in Congress and control all the statewide elected seats. So it's really been a remarkable turnaround. And after decades in the corner as everyone's dull stepchild, Michigan is now a true Cinderella story of political change and reform. So love to talk to you about how, I found this poll really interesting in terms of what policies, what the two of you think, how do you see this change? And maybe Lieutenant Governor, I'd like to start with you in terms of what do you think your administration has done that's impacted people in a direct way?
Thank you. So first and foremost, welcome to Michigan. I live 5 minutes from here, so I can walk home after this. But look, I am really proud to be part of New Deal. I just want to say that up top. This has been a group. It's been great to meet folks. Like I joined in 2020, so like I didn't get to meet anybody in person. So it's really great to have you here to be able to shake hands with folks who I've been on countless Zoom calls with, have collaborated with on reports, on learning sessions, hearing all the great work that all of you are doing all over America. And the purpose of this kind of organization, from my perspective, is really for us to help one another get better. Like if they say iron sharpens iron, and all of y'all are pretty sharp. And so being able to understand what policies are working in your own local context that we can all then figure out how to do our version of in our respective contexts, I think is really critical. And for me and Senator McMorrow, thinking about the state of Michigan, we do think there are some things that can be taken away from the work that we've done here over the last several years that can lead to not only political victories, but most importantly, as the poll reflected, like progress. Because the difference between Democrats and Republicans, from my perspective, is we actually want to create space for people to be their best. We want to help improve lives and create platforms for opportunity and do so in a way that people can actually feel in a way that's meaningful to them. And for Governor Gretchen Whitmer and I, that's literally what we've been talking about since campaigning together in 2018. We ran on a pretty practical platform that was about what are the things that matter most to the people in Michigan. For us, it was fixing roads, cleaning up drinking water, expanding access to healthcare. Very practical stuff. That ain't even ideological because most people don't like broken roads. Most people like water that's clean and safe. And most, maybe not everybody, but most people. And most people believe that you should at least have a chance of being healthy. And so coming into office and having to work with a Republican legislature was challenging, to say the least. But even in the midst of that, we still focused on what we knew was important to people. And that led to working in partnership with that legislature, and importantly, with Democrats in the legislature like Senator McMorrow, who was elected for the first time as well in 18, on record education funding, on a way to bypass an intransigent legislature to invest in those roads we talked about, on record investment in water infrastructure before the Biden-Harris administration and Democrats in Congress delivered historic infrastructure investment at the federal level that we could then draw down here in Michigan. So I'm an engineer by training, and so I think about problem solving a lot. It's the lens through which I see the world. And we focused on solving problems. We focused on being present in communities, getting to all of Michigan's 83 counties. We're a really, really, really big state, bigger than every state east of the Mississippi River. And we had to spend a lot of time in community, because even if we felt like things were not possible or they were difficult in Lansing, we knew that they were possible in Michigan. They were possible in places like Grand Rapids. I see Mayor Bliss here from the great city of Grand Rapids in West Michigan. We knew that we could work with local leaders to get things done for all of our constituents. And it's cool being statewide, having a district that includes everybody. So you have an excuse to go everywhere, to listen to everyone, but then understand how you can really get in there and solve the problems that they present to you. And so we focused on being very, very solution oriented. And I think as long as you are identifying what those solutions are in your locale, in your district, in your state, in your county, and show people that you are committed to addressing and finding those solutions no matter what, I think we're going to make a lot of progress.
Thank you. Senator McMorrow, you gave a truly heroic speech last year, and I'm interested. I've heard you describe it as an event that bifurcated your own life into before and after. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about what you've learned from that experience and having impact on people in such a direct way.
Sure. So first, I'm going to echo what the LG said. Welcome to Michigan. Welcome to Detroit. Thank you for being here. And yet, this was a really crazy experience. So for anybody who doesn't know, last year in April of 2022, I woke up on a regular morning to the news that a sitting colleague of mine had sent out a fundraising email for herself, accusing me of wanting to groom and sexualize kindergartners and wanting 8-year-olds to believe that they were responsible for slavery. And that's not a normal Monday. Just going to put that out there. But after the first 4 years in this job, I'm looking at Mari Manoogian, who I ran with for the first time in 2018, and she and I both flipped Republican districts. And for everybody in this room, you know, I think something that's important for context is we represented Mitt Romney's hometown, and we ran for something different. But in my first 4 years, we saw the trial run insurrection at our state capitol with armed gunmen in the gallery. We saw the then Senate Majority Leader following that sit down and take a meeting with this violent militia group and told them they have really good ideas and they just need to work on their branding. And this doubling and tripling down on conspiracy theories, violence, and culture wars. So all of that kind of led up to this very strange Monday that I found myself in. And because I had flipped a district, I'd also spent the first 4 years, I introduced 49 bills on every single issue that I ran on and got exactly 0 hearings on anything. So I've still never passed a bill that has been signed into law. We're working on that. It's coming. But at this point, I really felt like I had let my constituents down. I think especially for this group, you get into this job to help the people who sent you to office at every level, whether it's a state level, a local level, and to feel like you failed. I wasn't even sure I was going to run for re-election. So I hit this moment and said, you know what, I really don't have anything to lose. So if I'm going to go down, I might as well go down swinging. And I did. And I leaned in and identified the culture wars. But also at the end of that speech, I pointed out the connection for a lot of my constituents because I represented a lot of Republican constituents and a lot of Democratic constituents. And I recognized that all of this culture war nonsense was taking advantage of everybody to convince you to be so angry and hateful and fearful of somebody you may not have ever even met, that you don't notice that the people in charge aren't investing in the roads. They're not fixing the drinking water. They're not making sure that teachers stay in the profession. So I said that directly at the end of my speech, that people who are different are not the reason that our roads are still in bad shape, or that teachers are leaving the profession, or that your healthcare costs are too high. And for me, that was the difference, that we can stand up and stand in our values and call out, excuse my language, frankly, bullshit, because it is, but then point out the contrast. So we have to do both. And that's how kind of my life has been divided. And now that we are in a majority where we can prove what that both looks like, we can prove what the solutions look like, because it's not enough just to say they're not helping you if you don't offer another way forward.
Um, Thank you. I think that one point that you made that resonates with me, and as a voter, I often wonder why more politicians don't get to the point where they feel they have to say the thing that could get them to lose. And I think that's one of the reasons that speech resonated so much, is that that was a very gutsy moment to do that. It's much easier to run against election denial and Satanism charges, probably, than it is to run against fiscal conservatism and minimal government. And I think in some way the Michigan situation has been that the political turnaround has been just very much enabled by the Republican Party's really extremist actions. And I wonder, how you both reflect on that and think about how, if the party became more sane, whether these moves towards change and progress could continue.
So while I think that it is better to run against somebody who is publicly crazy, like that's better. But I do think that the story that we have to tell, like, actually does transcend that. And it's our job to tell the right story about it. So, regardless of the packaging of someone's conspiracy theoriness or denialism of reality or of elections, etc., like what we're running against, and W alluded to this, are people who are literally running for office to undermine the public sector. They're running for office because they do not believe that the public sector has a role to play in our present or our future. And we don't agree with that. But we have to tell a story about why the public sector does have a role to play, about why there are choices that can be made, investments that can be delivered, resources that can be distributed, that can position people to be successful, to have a place in today and to have a place in the future. And we have to be really intentional, forthright, creative, aggressive about that. And so I think while there's a parallel story about the complete devolution of the Republican apparatus in Michigan, but honestly, I don't think that story is very important. I think the important story is, how do we, in this moment, actually build a bigger and more robust governing coalition so that we can do more to things that matter. And what my hope is that all of us are constantly on the lookout for opportunities to demonstrate the values and the value that we can deliver for people, whether it is helping people to secure, like, we're in a crazy time fiscally, economically, financially right now. That's why we're exploring how we can work on ways for people to secure their retirement at a time right now when stuff is crazy. Defining what retirement means for a new generation of people. When we're looking at this transition in our economy in different industries and the anxiety that every single person has about the future, maybe due to technology directly or indirectly, how can we show that there's a path for people to have a role and a place in tomorrow's economy, and that we can help walk with them on that path through education and training and opportunities, matchmaking, attracting more investment. Like, so, I appreciate what's happened to the Republicans. Like, it is helpful politically. But honestly, the practical difference is that it just means that we have more people to talk to. We have more people to organize. We have more places to go, more people to connect with, and to tell a compelling story to. And I think our story is pretty compelling. The investments make a difference. And that's what we need to talk about.
And if I can just add to that, something that I think a lot about Michigan in 2022 is, yes, the Republican Party is doubling and tripling down on crazy right now, especially in this state. For those who are visiting, hi. The chair of the Republican Party in Michigan believes that Beyonce is Satan, that demons can be sexually transmitted, that yoga is satanic. Everything is satanic. That's happening
It's
right
true.
now. That's all true.
That's all
Hard to
true.
believe.
She is my constituent, by the way. And she tweeted at me to encourage me to do something. And in response, I thanked her for finally validating the election results in 2022 and said I was proud to be her state senator. But I think to the LG's point, what people should take away from Michigan in 2022 is not that we need to counter crazy with crazy. It's that people have had enough chaos. People don't want to relitigate the 2020 election. People don't want to relitigate what happened in COVID-19 and if closures were the right thing to do or not. People want to move forward. They want to know that they're going to have a good job. They want to know that their kids are going to be back in school and that their schools have been updated with HVAC systems and we've removed lead service lines, that they have filtered drinking water, that we are moving forward. Not relitigating the past and not lying about it and not coming up with some crazy dystopian nightmare about a state that you live in. I mean, I read the Michigan Republican Party website. I'm like, do you live in the same state? It's wild to not love the place that you live and want to try to make it better. So, I think that is, I do think it's going to take a few cycles for the two parties to come back to a place that they're normal. You would think that our opponents would have seen the results from 2022 and realized they kind of have to meet most people. But somehow the message they took away is, well, we just didn't go hard enough, which I don't think is the right way forward. But most people are tired. I talked to a woman in my previous district in one of the more Republican areas in my district. And she said something that I think about all the time is that I just don't want to have to watch the news all the time anymore. I want this to be boring. I don't want to have to care about your job. I just want to know and trust that regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, you're in there and you're trying to do your best. And that's something that sticks with me about how we message and what we put forward. And to the polling that Debbie talked about, most people don't know, especially on the state level, who your state legislator is, who your city council member is, or what they do. Something like talking about the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act is really wonky. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money that most people can't wrap their head around, but it's very different to say, this pothole is fixed now. This bridge is fixed now. You can trust that when you turn on your tap, there's clean water coming out. That's something that the rest of us at all of these levels have to communicate so that people know what we are doing for them.
But that's hard, isn't it? I mean, we just saw polling that showed that people didn't recognize, Democrats and Republicans, that major legislation had been enacted. So what can people do on the ground to really help connect dots?
You got to go on the ground. Like, it's not that hard. Okay, I'm gonna be real with you. Well, let me say it a different way. Because I don't think it's hard. I actually don't think it's complicated either. Like, when we ask the question about how can we make sure more people know what's going on, you got to go tell people. Like, this is not complicated. Like, all of y'all are smart people. We are smart people. But the way that we help and build relationship, the way that we build community, is that we actually have to go and meet people. We have to meet people where they are. And I don't mean, and so we meet people where they are online, meet people where they are in person, but we have to go and communicate. We have a story to tell. Now we can argue around the margins about the framing and how we position things and blah, blah, blah. But like, a poorly framed positive message is better than not talking to somebody. And so I think that we have to recommit. And in a moment like we're in Michigan right now, this is a moment for us to be more aggressive, to talk about the opportunities that are available for all of us in our state. And I think there's something to be learned from that, regardless of where you're at. Like, there's somebody else you could be talking to. There's another conversation to be had. There's another place to attend. There's another place to show up. There's another way to gather people and bring people together. Because again, this is what we are about as Democrats. We are about the power of collective action to the benefit of everyone. When I say everyone, it means all of us benefit when all of us benefit. But that means that we have to do the work to bring folks together and not shy away from that. And I think sometimes we do get flustered about making this more complicated than it actually is. We have to recognize that these wins, these policies, these opportunities mean different things to different communities, and actually go and do the work. Yes, your conversation with a black voter on the east side of Detroit, where I'm from, is a little bit different than a person in rural northern Michigan, but is it really? What do they want? You want access to a job, you want access to clean drinking water, you want your kids to get a good education and then feel like they can build their future where you are rather than having to move halfway across the country. Like, we kind of want the same stuff. And Democrats have answers to all those questions. And so while we are doing the work on a policy where I'd say, look, we want to make sure that people feel safe. Or if you are in the LGBTQ community, you now have explicit and affirmed civil rights protection in Michigan because the Democratic legislature delivered that to you. You have protection against gun violence that we haven't seen in 50 years in the state of Michigan because we don't believe it's acceptable for people to be at risk at a grocery store, on the street, in college, or in elementary school. We can do the work, but then we have to go talk about the work in an aggressive way.
And we also have to build that into the process. I think, this is the Idea Summit. We're all here because we love ideas and we love policy and we love coming up with the next great policy as if that is going to fix everything. It's not if we don't tell anybody about it. And I'm going to give two tangible examples because this is an Idea Summit, but a couple of things that we did in my office out of necessity that we've pulled forward. So in COVID-19, in the start of it, when everything shut down and we couldn't do coffee hours or town halls or anything anymore, I started hosting a live stream on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, and I do it on LinkedIn now too. I hooked that up. And at one point, 9,000 people were tuned in live. And this was before, I went viral and was on MSNBC all the time. This was in the beginning of COVID. And I recognized in that moment, this was working parents. These are people who can't come to a coffee shop at 8 a.m. on a Monday, not the same dozen people who would always come out and see me. So we kept doing it. We try to do it almost every week that the Senate is in session and just talk about, here's what we're moving, here's what votes we took, here's what this does. And people can ask questions live. And we get a ton of great feedback from people who say, I just tune in and I listen to it, and I feel like I know what's going on in my legislature. We also started doing, instead of just in-person events at one coffee shop, we started doing what we called precinct pop-ups, where we would pick a precinct delegate or one person in a community. They would volunteer to let us use their front yard or a driveway, and we would canvass the neighborhood and say, next Thursday, your state senator is coming. We're going to have some snacks, get to know each other. And at each of these spots, it wouldn't be a ton of people, but the barrier was so low. We had so many people who didn't even know that their state capital is in Lansing, thought I worked in DC, asked if I knew the president. And this is not a knock on them. People just don't know. We can't assume that people are following what comes out of Lansing or your city capitol building or your city hall. People have lives, they're busy. So how can we go to them and then build those relationships just by getting to know you as a neighbor? And there's so much of that, and we just have to build that into the process. It doesn't matter how many good ideas we come up with. If we don't tell anybody about them, they're not going to care.
Like, the responsibility to tell the story rests with the storyteller. Like, you did the work, you're proud of it, you negotiated it, you fought for it, you won it. Now you have to go tell that story. And I love the notion of building it into the process because that's not something you should start at the end. If you walk people with you in the process, they may be more invested in your solution as well. And they may be able to tell that story. And frankly, they probably can in a much more compelling way than you to people in their lives. And that's what we want to empower. Because again, we are about empowerment. We're about emboldening people to see that they have a role in this too. Like, we all have a place in it.
What do you see as the issues that are really animating voters today, like right now? Is it changing? Has Michigan changed, um, or is it has there been a real sea change, or are people just kind of interested in the same things? Is there anything that's really driving people forward at this point?
Yeah, I do think it's true that for 40 years we had a legislature that was so badly gerrymandered that did not accurately represent the will of the state as a whole. And, I heard that in my district, even from lifelong Republicans, that it had gone so far right and was so out of touch with things like common sense gun violence reform, with things like funding schools, with things like mental health care, that I really do believe that the thing driving a lot of people is we just want it to work and we want this to be normal and not chaotic. And that means a lot of different things. That means protecting reproductive rights. That means protecting the right to vote. That means making sure we're not giving air to conspiracy theories like we did in the last term, where there was hearing after hearing after hearing about election fraud conspiracies without a recognition that the very idea that we're using state resources and state buildings to hold the hearings gives them validity. So that's how I think about a lot of things. And it touches a lot of different issues. But more than anything else, people want to know their kids are going to be safe, they're going to have great opportunities, and that they can stay in Michigan. The number of people I talk to who say, I love it here and I don't want to leave, but I want to make sure they have opportunities.
But nobody wants to come here. How do we do?
I came here. I'm not from Michigan originally. Scandalous.
We've had the same population in Michigan for 70 years, I think, so approximately. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lieutenant.
So I think one, in order to, we have to make sure that people feel welcome and like there's a place for them. Like I've said that like 4 times, but that's really important. Like I think there are policies that fall from that, but principally, what we're working to communicate is that we see and hear you, and we hear the thing that you're anxious about, and we want to walk with you to figure it out. Like on a basic level. Again, there's a gentleman who used to run the Upper Peninsula State Fair, 2 peninsulas, 2 state fairs. Okay, and it's in Escanaba, Michigan, and he described me. So when I lived in, for those who don't know, so I lived in DC immediately before I came back home to Michigan. And when I lived in DC, I started this thing called Detroit Diaspora. It was about the fact that, kind of to your point, a lot of people from Detroit live a lot of places other than Detroit right now. They pursue professional opportunity, whatever it may be. And so I made this project so that people could be connected to the Detroiters in their community. Well, when I came home and I was actually working for the University of Michigan when I met this gentleman, and he said to me, the people in my community in Escanaba, they don't want their kids to leave either. They want their kid to be able to do what they need to do educationally, but then they want them to be able to come home and start that business. They want to start a business. They want them to be able to join the family farm if they want to join the family farm. I bring that up because I think we have work to do to make sure people can both see Michigan, or whatever your community is, but see Michigan for us as a place where you have a path to success. But also, yes, I'm going to be really aggressive. I will come to any of y'all states and cities to talk about Michigan, okay? To talk about the opportunities that we're trying to build here, because we also want to attract talent. And all of us want to do that in our respective locales. And that's a good thing. That is healthy competition, because it means we're pushing one another to do more and make a whole lot of attractive places to be successful in the country. I think that's the recipe for us to be successful. And so I think we're going to do that aggressively, and we hope to grow our population as a result of it.
Great. We're going to take a couple of questions from the audience. So anyone have anything they'd like to ask?
Good afternoon. I'm Jim Townsend. I'm the director of the Levin Center for Oversight and Democracy here in Detroit. So welcome to Detroit. I'm also an alumnus of the New Deal, so I see a lot of familiar faces, and these are 2 of my friends. So I want to ask you, though, I really buy into and agree with your point about championing and talking about policy success. But I want to challenge you a little bit about what is success, and is it enough to talk about that bill that passed, or do we have to go further? and talk about implementation, because a lot of things fail in implementation. And that's what the public sees. As Senator McMurray, as you pointed out, people they don't know about that bill that passed, and they're really never going to know about that. What they know about is what they see. So my question is, are you trying to do some things in Lansing to focus more on implementation, on what happens after these bills pass, and ensuring that we get the outcomes that they promise, number one? And number two, are you working to get the public more engaged in that process, hearing their voices? I'm going to call you Garland because it's too long to say Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist. I really hear what you're saying about going where people are, but I would just suggest that we want to welcome them in and maybe use some of that technology that's available to us to enable people to have more access to comment on how it's going. Thanks.
It's a great point, and something that, I mean, we're not going to change it overnight. Something that I've learned in government, I'm sure a lot of you share this, is it takes a long time to change the way an institution works. And a great example is on issues like gun violence. So I've been working on red flag legislation since starting in 2019. We finally passed those bills, and so often just internally, our digital communication staff, they'll clip my floor speech and they'll send it to me so I can post it, or what I said in committee, or what the bill signing was. But we heard so much testimony in committee from people who lost a family member to suicide by firearm, and recognizing that unless you're my mom or my grandma or like 5 other people, nobody's watching that, because people are not tuning in to watch Michigan State Senate committees. So can we change what we in our platform are putting out in the world? So the video that I ended up putting out when the bill passed had a little bit of what I said, but I also cut in clips from the Kobelicks, who are 2 parents whose daughter shot and killed herself, shot and killed her partner and her twin brother. Somebody who their parents knew was struggling through mental health crises, and they had called the police over and over and over again to try to stop their daughter from buying a gun, and they couldn't. That is why that bill matters. That's why that story matters. So it's a little thing, but going back to kind of our internal teams and saying we need to tell those stories, and not even from me, from the people who lived them, because that's why we do this work. And it takes a little bit more work. Committee is one thing, but going out and finding the people who are impacted, and that's just in the bill passages. To your point, keeping up on how things are implemented and then finding out if they're successful and finding those stories, again, it's we have to build it into the process, and that takes time.
So this is an important point. Look, and I said I'm an engineer. Like all I care about is implementation. Okay, and so we do need to tell the story of the entirety of the process and show that people do have a role to play through the whole thing. They have a role to play in the legislative process. You also have a role to play in making sure that what comes from that legislation actually solves the problem that it was intended to solve, so that maybe if it needs to be changed, it can be changed on the back end, et cetera. I'll give you an example of this. So for me, probably the canonical example of the differences both in policy and implementation is something that we did in the criminal justice reform space. I've been proud to lead our efforts here in the state of Michigan on reforming our criminal justice system to actually have it deliver justice to people. And so we had criminal record expungement laws in Michigan that existed and that nobody used. 6% of people who had an offense on their record that they were eligible to get cleared didn't get them cleared. Or they were only 6% got them cleared. And that's because it was hard, it was expensive, you had to have a lawyer, it take a long time, all that. Well, starting in 2019, we began a process of looking at our criminal legal system in a comprehensive way. And we also, in 2020, the governor signed a package of legislation called Clean Slate, which did 2 things primarily. One is it greatly expanded the amount of offenses that were eligible for records to be expunged. Basically, nonviolent offenses, but you could get them cleared after a certain amount of time. We also shrunk the time window for those offenses to be eligible. The second and most important thing, though, is we took on a project to automate that process. I say that twice because it was important to me that people who actually were entitled to justice from a system, they didn't have to do something extra to get the justice that they were entitled to under the law. It took 2 years to implement that system. There's a lot of stakeholder engagement in that, but in that, we had to continue to work with people who would ultimately benefit from this policy to tell us what it needed to look like. And they were the voices that had to, be louder than the some vested interests in the way that background checks worked previously and all these things. But what ended up happening is on April the 12th of this year, the Clean Slate program rolled out. And on that day, 1.7 million criminal offenses were cleared off people's records. We've had almost 2 million criminal criminal offenses cleared. Now, what that means is, I got to finish this point because this is why we do it though. What that meant though is that hundreds of thousands of people in Michigan instantly gained access to housing. You get an apartment. You can go back to school, reconnect with your family. You can get jobs that you're eligible for because of your qualifications, not because of your past history. That only happens because of including people in the implementation process. We can do that on everything. Might need to be a little bit more creative about how we do it on some issues rather than others. But the truth is, it's our responsibility to create those mechanisms and on-ramps to do it. But that is how we really will feel that the difference has been made.
Thank you both very much. It looks like we have time for one more. Okay. One provocative question.
Well, I don't know if it's provocative, but given that I'm Christine Hunchofsky, I'm from the state of Florida. Given that what you mentioned before about people, and that's what I hear all the time, they want to know that we know what they care about. They want to know that we're talking about the things that matter to them. How do you then, when you have a majority, which hopefully someday we will again in Florida,
You will.
how do you then decide what those items will be, what those significant legislative things will be that will let people know that? Like, how are you making that decision on your policy, and then what parts of it you're communicating the most to people to know that they're feeling seen and heard?
I love this question. So when we took majority, we were very intentional in both the state house and state senate, in showing alignment. And on day one, we introduced a set of 6 bills, and we were very intentional to not rank them. They were not numbered, but 6 policies that represented a lot of our values as a new majority. And they included repealing our 1931 abortion ban to make sure that voters knew we heard their will when they voted to amend our state constitution to protect reproductive rights, expanding our state civil rights act to explicitly protect LGBTQ people, also included repealing right to work, restoring prevailing wage, and expanding the earned income tax credit and repealing the retirement tax. This was a tax on seniors who were on a fixed income. And when you look at them together, it showed that, especially in Michigan, we're the Midwest, we're very practical. I think a lot of us had PTSD after 2016. We needed to show that we were going to care about your pocketbooks. We're going to make your life better. We're going to lift you out of poverty. I saw Kristen McDonald-Rivet is in the room. She has been a champion, probably one of the strongest experts in the entire country on the EITC and the Working Families Tax Credit, and that we are going to make sure that your fundamental rights are protected all at once. And that way, we're touching a little bit of everybody. We're communicating about those things at the same time. And I think the governor said, a really great line in State of the State, bigotry is bad for business. And it's all of those things together, that making sure you're seen, you're welcome, and that we care about the economics, we care about workers' rights, and we can do them all at once. And that, we really struggled with what's the top priority and which one of our groups or constituencies are going to be upset if it's not the top priority. And the reality is that there isn't just one thing. So talk about it all at once and also show that they're connected.
That's great. You think she said it? Or would you like to say something?
She got it.
I think you both do, and thank you very much. I think Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist is going to introduce our next speaker, I think.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank everybody seriously for engaging that. Senator McMorrow, thank you, of course, for being you, being an example. I also we got some more Michigan legislators came in. I see our Senate Majority Leader Winnie Brinks is here. We haven't had a Senate Majority Leader that was a Democrat in 40 years. First woman to ever hold that position in the history of the state of Michigan. It's amazing. And West Michigan is very well represented because now I have the privilege of being able to introduce to you our newest Democratic Congresswoman in Michigan, and that is Hillary Skolton. Now, she is a history maker in her own regard, but I want to give you a little anecdote that I think indicates the kind of public servant Hillary Skolton is. So she came into Congress in this most recent election, hit the ground running, serving on committees, small business and transportation. And I'm working on a thing. For those who don't know, I have a background in technology. I'm a software. I kept saying I'm an engineer. I'm a software engineer, to be specific. And so I'm trying to work with a bunch of stakeholders across Michigan to really align a vision around economic development from a technology and entrepreneurship perspective. And so we've been holding summits across different regions in the state of Michigan. And I got a text message at like 7:30 a.m. from Congresswoman Skolton on Friday, saying that some things had changed up on her schedule in Washington, and she just wanted to know if she could crash the tech summit. Newsflash: when you're in Congress, you don't crash things because no one says no to a congressperson they want to be invited to things. But the reason she wanted to come is because not only she was eager to contribute to the conversation, her and her staff, but also she wanted to make sure that the work happening in her part of Michigan was well supported. And that they knew that everyone at every level of public service was going to be working with them to not only take advantage of this like particular federal opportunity that we're pursuing, but more importantly, to grow our economy, to grow that opportunity so that everyone has a place in it. And that she's going to fight for that locally and nationally. And that's all we want of our representatives in Congress. So I am so proud that we have as part of our delegation, Congresswoman from Michigan's 3rd District, that is Hillary Skolton.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction. Yes, we had votes canceled and ended up being back in the district unexpectedly. And I was like, okay, what do we got? We didn't get in until like 3 o'clock in the morning, but I was like, where can we be? What can we do? How can we serve the people better? Good afternoon. It is so wonderful to be here with you. Thanks so much, Lieutenant Governor, for that great introduction. Thanks to the New Deal Summit for having us here today. I feel like these are my people. This is where it is happening. We are the New Deal makers in our government, making government work for the people and for our country. We really are at a crossroads right now in our country, and making sure that we have leaders who are prepared to take us into the 21st century is what it's all about. And summits like these are where we break through. So it's an incredible honor to be here with you today. We are hard at work in the United States Congress to capitalize on the successes of the Democratic House majority from the last term and President Biden. Implementing these gains is priority number one. When I came to Congress, I knew that my campaigning was going to continue just a little bit longer as we worked to get on my top committee choices. Many of you know you don't just sort of raise your hand and decide which committee you want to be on. You really have to advocate. And I knew that in order to serve Michigan well, we needed strong representation on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and the Small Business Committee. Transportation and Infrastructure is one of the most competitive committees in the United States Congress right now. And everyone said, you're never gonna get on that as a freshman. And I said, hold my two-hearted. Don't underestimate women from Michigan. We know how to get the job done. I'm honored to have been selected as one of only 5 new members on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, where we are implementing those critical dollars, rebuilding roads and bridges. When I came to Congress, I knew how important it would be to lead from the middle of the aisle and the middle of the country. It has been a top priority of mine to focus on bipartisan solutions. I've already introduced 3 bipartisan bills addressing critical workforce issues. These are bills that could have been designed as messaging bills, but instead I chose to work across the aisle, find partners who I could work with and get these bills introduced to build the 21st century workforce that we need. It's more than any other freshman, and it's what I'm committed to every single day. Also, leading from the middle of the country. I was chosen by my peers to be one of our 4 representatives to senior leadership, a representative from our freshman class. Currently in the United States Congress, we have huge overrepresentation in our senior leadership, both on committees and in our Democratic caucus, from the coasts and from deep blue states, but not enough representation from the middle of the country, the heartland, and from people who come from districts like mine, where you have to learn to talk to people who disagree with you. So I'm honored to have been selected to serve not only as a member of my freshman leadership team, but to hold leadership positions in both of my caucuses. I am so fired up to continue doing my part to continue the momentum that we have. There is so much happening in Congress right now, and I want to give you just a little bit of a federal update of some of the things that we're working on. One of the most important things that we've been talking about is making our federal dollars work. The American Rescue Plan has delivered state and local relief funds, as we know, to help our counties and cities keep our neighbors in their homes, ensure our children continue learning in schools, and that the teachers have the resources they need to teach them. Made sure to ensure that our essential public services could continue to operate. Meanwhile, the bipartisan infrastructure law, which I'm helping to implement, bringing dollars to fix our roads, support our airport, including our wonderful expanding Gerald R. Ford International Airport on the west side of the state. We're seeing an influx of funds that are directly responding to the top needs in our community. Already over $3 billion in federal money has been allocated to Michigan to help fix our roads, bridges, and highways. $136 million has come to Michigan airports to upgrade and expand terminals and keep Michigan connected to the world and the world connected to Michigan. Tax credits for heat pumps in the Inflation Reduction Act will help consumers save thousands of dollars a year in energy costs. And Michigan is receiving historic levels of federal funding. To keep those dollars coming, we need ongoing support from our local and state lawmakers, which is why I'm here today. You're on the ground every day hearing about these issues that matter to our neighbors, learning the information you need to make these compelling asks. I need you to keep in contact with me and our Michigan delegation so that we can be the best partners for you possible. I'm here today with my wonderful district director, Anissa Eddy, who oversees our operations here on the west side of the state. And if there's ever anything that me or my office can do for you, please don't hesitate to reach out. On the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, I'm so proud to serve on the subcommittees on aviation, water, and as the vice-ranking member on the United States Coast Guard, where not only do we deal with critical national security issues, but protect the critical economic driving force that is Great Lakes shipping. On the Small Business Committee, I'm the ranking member on government contracts and infrastructure. I just came from a tour of the Selfridge Air Base where we're learning about where investments in this air base will continue to grow our critical government contracting sector. I'm looking to diversify those contracts and make sure our small businesses, especially women and minority-owned businesses, have a fighting chance to compete for those competitive government contracts. As we emerge from this pandemic, it's more important to me than ever to keep our small businesses thriving. Last week was National Small Business Week, and I toured around the district to so many diverse businesses that make up the fabric of West Michigan small businesses. Small businesses are overrepresented in Michigan. Over 85% of our businesses here are considered small. In Grand Rapids, we know what it's like to start small in your garage and grow from there. Who will be our next entrepreneurs, movers, and shakers? It's those individuals that I look forward to connecting with and championing. There's a lot of news coming out of Washington right now, and I know the conversations surrounding the debt limit are top of mind for everyone. Here's where we are in those discussions. Democrats, including myself, are at the table every single day, having conversations about where we go on this debt ceiling. Unfortunately, the proposal that we have in hand from Republicans is not serious, but it has catastrophically serious consequences for the American people, cutting much needed benefits for our veterans, our children, and the elderly. We need individuals to come to the table. Part of fiscal responsibility, a thriving value in West Michigan, is paying America's bills on time and keeping our excellent credit rating around the world. So we'll continue to negotiate on future budget talks that will make us more fiscally responsible, but we need to make sure that we adhere to the fiscal responsibility that we have by paying our bills on time, and that continues to be our united message as Democrats. I'm part of the Bipartisan Problem Solvers Caucus, and we are actively engaged in these negotiations as well. You know, it's hard to overstate when you come to Congress and you want to work so badly on bipartisan talks and you watch your Republican colleagues cheering at the sound of taking away health care from veterans. You know, that is the state of things right now. So we'll continue to come to the table, but part of being a problem-solving, solution-oriented lawmaker is also knowing where not to compromise. I'm also so proud to be a leader in the new Democratic Coalition, one of my favorite caucuses in Congress. There I am vice chairing our Workforce Development Task Force, where we're focused on making sure that we can address issues of drastic understaffing across the board. We know that transportation is a key barrier. Smart immigration reform, which I'll talk about in just a minute, is also a key component. And making sure that individuals have access to affordable health care is also a top concern. You know, I mentioned immigration reform. We voted last week again on the Republicans' non-serious proposal on immigration reform. West Michiganders in particular, but across our state, have been asking, really begging us for years to come up with a solution to the nagging immigration crisis. Immigrants contribute so much to our community, socially, culturally, and economically. And the crisis that we have right now needs to be resolved because it is an economic issue, it's a national security issue, and it is a humanitarian issue. I've worked on immigration issues for almost close to 20 years now, and it is so important that we not only keep our country safe, but that we move our country forward to a 21st century immigration system that allows us to compete in an increasingly global marketplace. Here in Michigan, we know that tourism is a driving force in our economy. Whether you're skiing up north, going to Mackinac in the summers, we need a smart and efficient immigration system to get the workers here, the seasonal workers here, that we need. And we can't do that right now. I hear from small business owners all across the state who don't have the workers that they need and are worried they won't be able to open up shop this summer. Additionally, in agriculture, in order for our specialty crops we all love, like apples, cherries, and blueberries, to be harvested and sent to market, we need the individuals here to do that work. I just had an ag roundtable 2 weeks ago with farmers, and they just said, we can't compete in this economy with the workforce that we have right now. There are solutions out there, and we need individuals ready to come to the table. The longer we wait to take decisive action, the more impact we'll continue to see on our economy. The only way for us to move forward on secure and humane immigration reform is bipartisan action. And every day I'm working with my colleagues to get them to come across the aisle and join us in a common sense reform. I want to wrap up because I know that we have so much more to discuss today, a full agenda ahead, and I hope that we can continue to have an energizing discussion about this New Deal in the United States of America. It's going to take each and every one of us at the room to bring our best selves, our indefatigable optimism, and hard work. Summits like these are where we break through. When we all work together, we can make real progress for our state and for generations of Michiganders to come. Thank you so much.
Congresswoman, thank you so much. Great to see everybody. I know many of you. I'm Jonathan Dworkin, Vice President for Policy and Communications at New Deal. I want to welcome up our next speakers to kick off a series of conversations about how folks are effectively implementing the American Rescue Plan. We have Chelsea Powell from Results for America and Dave Coulter, County Executive here in Oakland County, Michigan. So welcome.
Let's try this one. Yes? Awesome. That was an incredible introduction to our day from all of the amazing elected officials in Michigan. I am Chelsea Powell. I'm with Results for America, a national nonprofit. I'm here to talk about how we can make the most of the American Rescue Plan investments and so many other opportunities that have come through this historic time. Also, just wanted to say hello from Wisconsin, the other side of the lake. I have a few friends in the room that also made the trip over, maybe as early as me this morning, and we are very glad to be here with you. So excited to be up here with County Executive Dave Coulter. Nice to meet you. Read a little bit of your bio. I think it's incredible that you have led the county through the pandemic right after you started. Great work. And your prior decade as the mayor of Ferndale.
Yeah.
Woo!
Go Ferndale. For you local people.
So we're going to have a conversation about what you are doing in your community and just more broadly about the tremendous opportunity to invest these dollars in a way that is going to have the biggest impact for our residents.
Well, Chelsea, I do think we have a challenge because we're coming on right after lunch. Everybody's eaten. I haven't seen anyone take a break yet. So you guys, we're going to try to do our best to fire you up. I wore socks that could help. I don't know. But thank you. Thank you all for sticking around and not leaving on break as we talk about, I think, a really important subject, which is not only how did you spend your ARPA dollars, which is kind of a common conversation, which is great, but how did you measure it? How do you know that it's actually making an impact? And that's what I look forward to chatting with you about. So.
Absolutely. Well, this has come up a couple of times this morning already, but I think it is so important and exciting to be in a room full of people that want to use these federal funds to have the biggest possible impact for your residents and leaders that believe that good government is the way forward. So glad to be here with you all. I'm going to take my notes. I didn't realize I was going to be holding a mic and doing notes at the same time, but I'm going to do it anyway. We are in the middle of a $4 trillion opportunity. And within that, you have your American Rescue Plan dollars, you have your bill dollars, you have your IRA dollars, and opportunities like CHIPS and Science Act. One of the most incredible things about the American Rescue Plan is the SLFRF funds that are flexible and offer a tremendous opportunity to transform your community in service of key economic outcomes, in service of a more competitive workforce, in service of in service of growing economic mobility, which we are going to talk about, in service of racial equity outcomes and of better infrastructure and climate resilience. We at Results for America have been around for a decade. We help governments use data and evidence to maximize their impact, which I think resonates in this room. Effectiveness is a key part of what you all are trying to accomplish, and being able to measure your impact is a huge part of the then storytelling that you can give to your community about what works. And as you choose how you're going to invest your dollars moving forward, it's critical to know which of the innovative ideas that you have tried through these influx of dollars are going to have and have had the biggest impact on outcomes in your community. Very briefly, I'll just share, because this is an idea summit, the Results for America idea that I would like to talk about just quickly with you is that we noticed from all of the American Rescue Plan annual reports that there's a tremendous amount of pilots and innovative ideas that jurisdictions all over the country are doing. 40% of 150 cities and counties in all 50 states that we reviewed showed that they were investing in pilot initiatives. Fewer than 15% were ready to evaluate the impact of those initiatives, and we see that as a gap. And so we have, in partnership with JPAL North America, created an opportunity to train governments on how we can evaluate the impact of those programs. And not just what is the opportunity to do a randomized evaluation, but also how can we leverage these dollars to build government skills, to build the capacities in a jurisdiction, in a county, to actually think about collecting that data on the front end, designing an evaluation, making those decisions long term that are based on what actually works. And so we have a ton of opportunities that are coming up. We have a workshop series that starts tomorrow. We have training sprints over the next 2 years. I'm happy to share more information about all of these, either in our conversation or after this. And we would love to have you and your teams participate so that you can get closer to knowing exactly what's working best for your constituents. So with that, I've talked a bunch. I am going to pass it over to the county executive to talk about what you're trying, what you're learning, and how you're putting money toward economic mobility in your community.
Yeah, well, thank you. So the first thing is that initially, before ARP dollars, we got CARES Act dollars. Some of you might remember that. And those had to be spent very quickly. And so that was what we considered in Oakland County more for acute needs, right? The keeping businesses open and just identifying the myriad of things that COVID had exposed. But when we got ARP dollars, and for Oakland County, we got $244 million. I've been in elective office now for 20 years. I never thought I'd see the day I could say, we got $244 million to do important stuff with. What the lens we put it through was, it needs to be transformational because we're not going to get this chance again, and let's hope not. Let's hope there's not another pandemic. But it also, there has to be a sustainability plan to it because we're only going to have these funds for 3 years, and then it either has to live on its own or we have to figure out a way to pay for it. So with those two lenses, we looked at the things that we could do. I want to talk to you about one specific program because measurement is important to me. I'm also going to say this. I'm the first Democrat to ever be the county executive in Oakland County, Michigan. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Oakland County. Yes! It's a big place, 1.3 million people, bigger than 9 states. So it's kind of like being the governor of a small state. And yet, to my surprise, when I got there, I was shocked by how little measuring these business-minded Republicans that preceded me actually did. There's a lot of anecdotes about programs, but not a lot of measuring. So that surprised me a little bit. But I'm all about data and measuring. And so I knew that if we were going to be able to convince our residents that what we were doing is important, that we had to measure it. And one of key priorities, one of the things that I was passionate about even before the pandemic, was on getting people more education and training. We know that a high school degree just isn't going to get you the job that can help you raise a family and be successful in the coming years. And so getting more of our residents with some sort of a post-secondary degree or industry recognized certification was a huge goal of ours. It's also, fortunately, a goal of our Democratic governor, Gretchen Whitmer, who set a goal that she wants to have 60% of Michigan adults with some kind of post-secondary degree or certification by 2030. She calls it 60 by 30. Well, I took a look. We're a pretty prosperous county. Our talent, what draws a lot of companies to Oakland County. So I asked the question, where are we? And we were at 61%. So then I said, well, I guess we could just sit on our laurels for another 9 years.
No.
Of course we can't do that. So we got together the education leaders, the labor leaders, everyone who touches this space. And if the county were willing to make an investment and convene and do this work, what do you think we could do? and they're the group that decided that we could get to 80%. So we call it Oakland 80 in Oakland County. And it's a very comprehensive program, but there's the number one measurement, right? We're trying to get to 80%. The residents can see it, they can feel it, and I'll be judged by in 2030 if we didn't do it, but they can understand it. But there's obviously a lot of metrics that underline that. It's about raising wages and income. It's about unemployment. Here's, talking about measures, some I think eye-opening measures is why we tell this story to residents about why it's so important to invest in this space. A resident in Oakland County who doesn't have a degree or certification makes, on average, about $25,000 a year. Somebody with a degree or certification makes $69,000. It's the difference between $12 an hour and $30 an hour. There's polling that shows too many people think that you can get by with a high school diploma, and I think we know that that's not true. So we've been working at it, a lot of different ways that we can talk about. There's a lot of different strategies, but I'm proud to report that in 2.5 years since we launched this program, we've gone from 61% to 69% of our residents with a degree or certification. I'm committed to getting to 80%, but it takes strategy, it takes intentionality, and then you got to measure it, right?
You got to measure it. And one thing that is great about sort of the national movement to get to 60% post-secondary attainment that you are a leader on is that there are evidence-based models that are already proven across the country. And one thing that we love to sort of shout from the rooftop at Results for America is that you do not have to come up with everything on your own. There are models out there that have been proven to be effective, and you can use them. And you can also localize them and listen to your constituents and set goals that are appropriate and pick the models that work best for you and your community. So if you don't want to stand up an evaluation for whether this program has impact because it's brand new, which we do highly recommend, you can also find a model that works and that has been shown to work across the country. I think post-secondary attainment is such an important lever for our economic growth and prosperity. And I do think, being a Midwesterner, I have seen this throughout my career, that we really believe in the Midwest that you can have that career that will sustain your family with a high school diploma. And that is not what our economy looks like anymore. That's not what our businesses look like anymore. I live in a sort of small manufacturing city, Racine, Wisconsin, and most of our businesses' entry-level positions that could potentially build into a longstanding career requires some training or certification. And these are manufacturing companies, and they are the heart of our community. But our students who are coming out of our high schools need that next step. They need partnerships with post-secondary institutions. They need navigation. All of these things that you are doing are so critical.
I was going to say on that point. So we literally have 6 people, full-time navigators that touch these folks, help them out, because one of the first things that I heard when we got the educators and the skilled trades and all the folks together was, Mr. Executive, we don't necessarily need help in enrolling students. We're doing okay with that. It's keeping them in because life happens. A bump in the road happens. They lose their car. They get pregnant. There's a death in the family. They drop out because it's easy to do, and they don't have. Some of us did when we were younger, and they don't come back. So the key focus for us has been people who had started school or started a training and then getting them back in. And then the other ironic part is one of the things we also heard was parents push their kid into 4-year school and universities. That's just, they were trained to believe. And so part of the education is parents to say, did you know that if your son or daughter wants to operate a bulldozer, that they'll pay him or her $40 an hour after high school to do that and pay for their apprenticeship program at the same time? There are opportunities short of a 4-year degree, and that's a real education for the parents. So there's a lot of work to do in it, but if we can change the narrative on that, I don't think anything else would have a more dramatic effect on our economic success in our county.
Absolutely. And I think particularly with the guidance in the American Rescue Plan. Oh, I lost it. keeps going out on me, particularly within the guidance within the American Rescue Plan, listening to community, using evidence-based models, investing in your own capacity to do this sort of assessment and evaluation and progress monitoring and goal setting so that you have the ability to not just start the program and watch it get implemented, but to support its implementation along the way, and to do whether it's progress evaluations to sort of, or process evaluations to sort of see what's working just within implementation, or impact evaluations at the end. We know that in healthcare, navigators are a proven model for ensuring that folks are getting the services they need. It is completely appropriate to evaluate whether navigators in the post-secondary system could also be seen as a proven model. And if they are, how do we shift dollars toward that as a long-term investment if we know that's what works? And I think one of the great things about this group of leaders and this Idea Summit is that you can take, and tied to the American Rescue Plan investments, is that you can take those great ideas that you have and you can really make the case through true outcomes that are felt by your community, so that you can move from 61 to 69% of your students having or your adults having post-secondary credentials, which, considering the time frame of a pandemic, is exceptional.
And on the notion of navigators, they've proven to be such an important tool because people can get information on the internet, they can get it in different places, but the folks that we're trying to reach really need someone to help them out, someone to sit down and say, look, here, I got a plan for you. And we've done the same thing, this navigator notion, with our small businesses. We realized after the pandemic, after the CARES Act, that women, minority, and veteran-owned small businesses have unique and additional challenges, and we wanted to look at our county through an equity lens as well. So we also hired a team of business navigators to literally say, what's your business plan? Do you have a social media plan? Do you know how to get capital? All of these things. Because even though the information is sort of out there, it's really difficult to access for a lot of these folks who are busy running their business or trying to raise their family and live a life. And so this notion, if you can invest in it, of actual navigators whose full-time job is to help people, it's been a game changer for us, not only on the education front, but on the small business front as well.
So one last question for you, because I think we're almost done with our part of this panel. You are the county executive. You don't educate students. You're not responsible for making sure that their butts are in chairs. How did you decide that educational attainment would be a priority for you running a county? And how did you bring your county along, your constituents along with you on that? Or was it they were all in?
I mean, that's a great question, because I had the same issue when I was mayor. The mayors of a city don't typically run the schools either. But I used to tell our community, because we leaned in and did whatever we could to help to support the community, the schools, because it's important to a successful community. So I took the same approach here, right? It's like, yeah, I know we don't run the schools, but our kids are important and our schools are important, and we need to invest in it. I got less pushback on the schools, by the way, than I did with mental health. In Oakland County, there's a mental health authority that is outside the purview of government. But I saw the statistic that only 1 out of every 5 adults that needs mental health services actually get it, and then that only got worse during COVID. So we spent more money on ARP dollars on mental health services than on anything else, including educational. And there was some pushback about that, but I'm like, we can't afford to ignore these issues that intersect so many other parts of what we're trying to do as a county government. And so, I don't know, I just put my head down and said, we'll measure it, we'll give you the results, thank you. But these things are too critical. And everybody, especially after COVID, sort of understood, especially around mental health, how important that was. So we just did it.
Yeah. The benefit of being a local leader. Sometimes you can just push forward and people come along. So that's exceptional. It's so great to hear about what you're doing. Just as a last reminder, our program that we're doing at Results for America in partnership with the Poverty Action Lab, the research arm of MIT, is actually called LEVER, which stands for Leveraging Evidence and Evaluation for Equitable Recovery. And there's tons of opportunities to engage so that you can get the resources and capacities that you need on your team, in your staff, in your jurisdiction, to really measure the impact of how you're spending this historic investment in local government and our communities.
And if I could just say one last thing, it's this. If you've never been to Michigan before or Detroit before, or you haven't been here in a long time, we're very proud of our community and our state, and we think we're an unknown, secret, awesome place. So if you enjoyed it, go back and tell your friends, okay? Tell them you had a great time in Detroit. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Chelsea and County Executive. Really enjoyed that. Our next segment is going to feature advancing housing solutions with the New Deal leader, Grand Rapids, Michigan, Mayor Rosalind Bliss, who was first elected and took office in 2016 as the first female mayor of her city. Before that was 10 years as a city commissioner. She'll be joined by Donald Renscher, who is group executive for housing, planning, and development here in the city of Detroit, coordinating with a number of different departments across the city, and has been working since 2015 on developing inclusive housing and neighborhood redevelopment strategies. We'll be moderated by Sharon Wilson Gino, president of the National Multifamily Housing Council, who has spent 30 years as a leader in the housing industry. So Sharon, thank you so much. I'll let you take it from here with the group executive and Mayor Bliss.
Hello, hello.
Oh, good afternoon. Hi. I'm Sharon Wilson Janot. I'm the president of the National Multifamily Housing Council, which is a national nonprofit trade association for 2,000 of the largest multifamily housing providers and the people that work within creating housing in that business. As the Congresswoman said, I feel like I'm here with my people. This feels really good to me. My father was a Democratic local official for 32 years. So much of what I learned about housing, I learned through his eyes. So I know the sacrifices you make, the sacrifices your family makes, and really appreciate your work. So thanks for having me. Housing is a kitchen table issue now. Having worked in this world for more than 30 years, it has never before come to the attention of local, federal, and state lawmakers and voters the way it has post-pandemic. As we know, access to quality housing creates a whole host of opportunities for households and families, from health to good nutrition, to good schools, to good jobs. We are facing a housing shortage in this country. Our recent research shows that we are short 4.3 million housing units that need to be created between now and 2035 just to keep pace with our growing economy and our growing population. That's a lot of units. The supply has led to a lot of households being cost burdened. Fully 1/3 of American renters now pay more than 30% of their income for rent and utilities, and that number continues to grow. In Michigan, those numbers are even higher. I know in Grand Rapids, it's probably plus 40%, and in Detroit, about the same. So in certain communities, that number is even higher, and that is due in large part to shortages, in some respects following even the great financial crisis of 2008, but made even worse by the pandemic. We are also in uncertain economic times, as we all know. Interest rates are climbing. We had bank failures upon which the multifamily housing industry relies in order to finance housing. So we have a lot of challenges ahead of us. I saw a recent report by Moody's last week that we have lost an additional 500,000 affordable housing units since the beginning of the pandemic. So our challenges continue to grow. State and local lawmakers and the federal lawmakers as well are really faced with two sets of choices to help promote housing. One are sets of choices that help cultivate the creation of new housing and building more housing. The other one is a set of choices around regulating housing. The choices around cultivating housing are really, really important, and sometimes the regulatory framework that are being promoted, while they appear easy and can appeal to voters in the short term, they're going to hurt us in terms of our ability to create supply in the long term. Some of meeting the needs for affordably priced housing, especially at the state and local level, there are a number of things you can do, including investing your ARPA funds in housing, especially long-term housing solutions, streamlining or fast-tracking zoning opportunities, creating opportunities for tax abatement, enabling by right zoning and otherwise incentivizing that by right zoning through mechanisms that also create affordable units as well. Um, Other obstacles to NIMBYism too, and breaking down those barriers are really important to the creation of more housing, especially affordable housing. There are a number of efforts on the federal level as well, and obviously state and local governments partner well with the federal government in terms of getting those resources. There are bills pending before Congress to improve the low-income housing tax credit and a new middle-income housing tax credit, which would most certainly help leverage private investment into those areas. The Biden administration proposed a housing supply action plan, which included a really interesting mechanism to incentivize local governments to break down barriers to zoning through federal transportation dollars. An interesting idea. Adequate reform and adequate funding for the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Many communities are using the Housing Choice Voucher Program, although it is onerous and costly, and there simply aren't enough. The previous speaker talked about 1 in 5 people having access. We have 1 in 4 people that have access to affordable housing that need it in this country today. So we have a lot of room to grow there as well. There are a number of policies that would also regulate housing, and those really undercut and disincentivize some of the opportunities for including supply. The federal government has put forward a renter's bill of rights that would kind of step in the middle of some of the relationships that already are created on the state and local level, that relationship between housing providers and residents, and that's a cause for some concern. Also, some questions around limiting the eviction process and creating a federal policy around that, which is going to be difficult given the differences in different communities across the country. State and local governments in many cases are faced with questions around rent control, rent stabilization, rights of first refusal, and other things. While understandably those are well intended and seem to help people in the short term, they are long-term disincentives to more housing investment and really prevent us from creating that type of supply that we need in the future, and also have an exclusionary impact in many communities where it really creates incentives for people already in place who have access to the housing in those communities, and it disincentivizes and really boxes out predominantly low to moderate income families, many of whom are also people of color, who won't have access to that housing because the incentives are only provided for those that are already in place. So there's a lot of opportunity, however, for the creation of more housing opportunities, especially using that once in a lifetime ARPA opportunity. So given how historic that opportunity is, can each of you talk a little bit about what your cities have done to use that ARPA funding for housing?
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be with you and up here with so many awesome people. I want to give a huge shout out to Mayor Coulter as I get started. Always good to see you, us mayors. We steal ideas all the time. And even though you're at the county now, we're still in Kent County stealing your idea about setting an educational goal. So thank you for your continued work. But I want to give that highlight because all of us know that the work we do around housing is closely integrated to the work that we're doing around supporting educational goals, workforce development, public transportation. All of these issues are so interconnected. And so I'll talk about some of the things that we're doing in Grand Rapids around housing. So if you're not familiar with Grand Rapids, we're over on the west side of the state. We're the second largest city in the state of Michigan. We have a population of about 200,000. We're about 44 square miles, so pretty densely populated. We're the fastest growing city in the state of Michigan, fastest growing region. I and my entire team were very data driven. We just did a housing needs assessment, and just to give you some perspective, we need to build about 14,000 housing units in the next 5 years just to meet current demand. It is an incredibly difficult issue that we're facing. And so going back to COVID, like all of you, we were in the midst of trying to figure out how do we respond to this global pandemic. And at the same time, we saw all of the issues around housing exacerbated. And so my philosophy is out of great challenge and obstacle comes great opportunity. And so how do we use this as an opportunity to try new things? My fellow mayors out there, I see some of you, we love the word pilot. Even though I've tried to shift us to start using the word experiment, people don't tend to like that word as much. So a pilot it is. And so we took the opportunity with our ARPA funds to not only to support the work that we knew was working and fill gaps, especially in capital stacks, but also to try new things. So a couple of things that we did at the city, and then I'm happy to build on with some additional details if you like. The first thing we did is that we wanted to make sure that we weren't experiencing the same thing that all of us experienced during the Great Recession, and that is a massive inflow of evictions. So we worked really closely with our district court to set up an eviction diversion program. So that was one of the first things that we did. And we brought in a number of partners to help us do that. The other thing that we did is that for a long time we had been talking about our response from our public safety departments, including our fire department, really drilling down into the data. Our fire department responds to over 20,000 calls, a significant portion of them actually in a very heavily concentrated area in our city were to individuals experiencing homelessness. And so we created, in 2020, we created a homeless outreach team. So we took a number of officers, 4 officers from our police department, 6 firefighters from our fire department, and then we partnered with our county to bring in mental health and behavioral health workers and created a homeless outreach team, trying to be much more proactive than just reactive and recognizing the fact that there are individuals, even though we had shelter space available, we still have a number of individuals who are unsheltered, who refuse to use shelter for a whole host of reasons. And so really actively going out and working proactively to connect with individuals and then to try to get them the resources they need. Some of it is just helping them navigate the system. Again, I love the word navigator. We can use them all over the place, but particularly as we try to respond to individuals who are most vulnerable, how do we get them the documentation they need to access resources? And so our homeless outreach team was started during the pandemic. And we have been able to divert individuals from both the emergency room and jail and get them into more appropriate services. We also have been able to partner with our county. We have a great relationship with our county, fortunately. I know that's not always the case for mayors, but in Kent County, we work really collaboratively, and we've been working with them and secured some additional funds from the state. So I want to thank my state friends who are here, and including Senate Majority Winnie Brinks. I know she's here somewhere. But we were able to secure funding, and we'll be opening up an 18-bed crisis stabilization unit, recognizing that that was a huge gap in our system. And then we've also just more recently taken $5 million from ARPA funds to fill in gaps for low-income projects that are shovel ready but just can't make the capital stack work. And so we just funded, there's 8 different developments that we took $5 million, and we are helping them get over the finish line to make the numbers work for them. And those will all be starting construction over the next about 3 months, 4 months. So those are some of the things we're doing. I can share with you a whole host of other things as we look at not just responding to individuals who need housing, but really people who are struggling the most and who are unsheltered.
Yeah, that's pretty fantastic. I think the housing conversation is so robust, and you could go down homelessness route, you can go down the ownership route, you can go down the rental route. You can talk about people who are low income. You could talk about people who are middle income. At the end of the day, affordable housing is people who are not spending more than 30% of their income on their housing expenses. And as you said previously, it impacts so many parts of an individual's life. And so I think the first thing that we did was identify the biggest tool that provides, financial tool that provides affordable housing in the state of Michigan. MISHDA, the Michigan State Housing Development Authority, recently released a housing evaluation for the state of Michigan. Over 50% of people who are housing burdened, meaning they're paying more than 30% of their income on housing expenses. And there was an absorption number of around 50,000 units that need to come down, are needed in the next 5 years for the entire state to really meet the demand. So it really was an eye-opening experience in reading that document. And so it was like, how do we address those issues?
right now, the biggest tool being the low-income housing tax credit, we also saw huge gaps across our portfolio. I would say about 2,000 units that we needed to essentially help cover those gaps. And so I think we did it as a strategic leveraging moment with the help of Mayor Bliss and other mayors around the state to really push for the affordable housing funding to be pushed through the legislature. And I think right now we're at 150 million, and we're continuing to push to see if we can leverage state ARPA money in additional to our own city ARPA money. So the city of Detroit set aside around $50 million to be dedicated to our gaps. I could tell you that's helped us address maybe 30%, 40% of our projects, and we still have more in the pipeline that we need to address. So definitely using the low-income housing tax credit as well. If thinking about pilot issues, I talk to the mayor all the time. I always ask him who provides the most affordable housing in the city of Detroit and the state of Michigan. And it's not a developer. It's just usual like private citizens who are living in areas of low market areas, and they're providing rents at very low incomes. And so what do we do to help stabilize them to provide quality housing? They don't receive a tax abatement or incentive. They don't receive gap funding at all. And so our idea is to essentially, this was our pilot idea, was to create the housing services team. We have about 75 individuals that are hired, and we're going to be making this announcement pretty soon. You can call a number if you are housing insecure, and this is like a fine line between that and homelessness, right? You have funding or you have money, you have a job, but you are trying to locate quality housing, right? But they're not always provided by regulated affordable housing developers. And so these people will be essentially case managers working with individuals who call in. And I think we've identified approximately 1,000 units right now that are available privately that are at rents at low market or very low rents. And so we will help you get your lease together and get all the documentation you need to get connected to that lease to make you a viable candidate to live in those units. And it's a way to connect to the private market. Now we have to do some other policy, like push forward some other policy ideas to get those landlords more help, but it's a way to connect to folks to see like we can get you some affordable housing at the same time. What's also interesting about this particular program, our other pilot idea on the other side is the Jumpstart program, where if you sign up for the Jumpstart and receive educational training, get your degree or GRE, no, that's, yes, yes, GED, sorry, I have so many things in my mind right now, that we will actually pay you a monthly salary to attend these classes, and we'll connect you to job opportunities. So for the first 6 months, it's $600 a month. The next 6 months after that, it's $400 a month, and the next 6 months after that, it's $200. Well, it's to essentially give you that additional money to help pay your rent, but also give you the educational training where we can connect you to job opportunities. Because at the end of the day, I cannot help you find housing if you do not have income. So it's a way to help address that situation. We also have a large amount of money going to Renew Detroit. We are helping people stabilize their homes, which is another big issue with people in the city. We have very, very old homes here in the city, and the biggest thing that people call in, we said, what's the most expensive repair people have? It's the roof. They could cobble something together to figure out how to go get the pipes looked at or get an electrician over, but a roof is going to cost you $15,000, right? And so we essentially are giving priority to our Detroiters who have lived here the longest. They call in. We're going to be doing about 2,500 roofs in the city of Detroit, but for you to actually be eligible for it, you have to sign up for a poverty tax exemption, which allows you to not be, you will not have to actually pay your taxes on your home. So it's like we've seen an influx of people who are submitting to that, again, providing additional security and leveraging other programs as much as possible. And doing a lot more, I know.
No, and you guys have both talked about some really creative ways to leverage and increase supply permanently. Are your communities also looking at regulatory opportunities to make the housing production process much less onerous for developers to help bring them forward? And if so, what are those?
Yes. Obviously, we all know that there are multiple things that it's a multi-pronged approach to solve this problem, and regulation is one of them. Zoning, obviously, is one of them. We're currently working on our master plan, specifically looking at growth and how do we encourage more housing and especially certain neighborhoods throughout our city. So a couple things that we've done is we made changes to our accessory dwelling unit. Made that process easier, trying to encourage individuals to build ADUs throughout our city, especially in some of our densely populated neighborhoods. But then we've also looked at zoning, and we made certain types of zoning. We made it by right, and so corner lots. We looked at all of our corner lots. You can now by right build a fourplex. We looked at vacant properties. We only have about 500 vacant properties where we found that we could do some infill in our city. And we're looking at how do we encourage infill in those places, in those, even looking at lot sizes. So many of us know that we have restrictions, and a lot of our lots at the time were not buildable. So we changed the size and really made those what historically would have been unbuildable lots more buildable and by right. So we're looking actively at what do we need to do with our zoning code. We're going to have a joint meeting between the City Commission and our Planning Commission, where we're going to go through and look at anything else that we can do currently while we're in the process of updating our master plan that we can change immediately to encourage more housing. But that is always something that we're looking at. We have low density, moderate density zoning already. That encourages and allows for multi-units in low-density neighborhoods based on the character of the neighborhood. And then we're working very closely with some of our nonprofit organizations and what we can do around using different tools to support housing, especially home ownership. We know that home ownership is absolutely key to wealth generation and building wealth in our neighborhoods. So how can we potentially use couple brownfield TIF with community land trust to pay for affordability, where someone can actually purchase a home and own that home? And there's a package of bills right now in Lansing. It's a 4-package bill around allowing us to use brownfield TIF for cost of sale. So we're really hopeful. I see Senator in the back is shaking her head. She's been a great leader on this issue in Lansing. But we need more tools in our toolbox, not just to support large-scale housing projects, which are important, but we also need those smaller scale projects and infill, and we need to support homeownership. It's a huge priority for us.
And I know Detroit's been in this game for a long time. Do you have it? We were running out of time, but do you have a couple quick ones you want to add?
Yeah, so I know one legislative rule that, so the legislature just recently, whether they know it or not, but recently approved a bill that allowed the payment in lieu of taxes, a pilot, which is used along with a lot of light tech or tax credits, to be provided through municipalities, and they can actually issue those pilots to anybody who is providing housing at 120% AMI or lower. And that actually allows us to provide that pilot and that tax incentive to create the affordable units that are desperately needed outside of the typical affordable housing developers who are using like HUD funds, which we know it's not enough, right? So how do we create access for the private individual who are providing affordable housing opportunities?
You guys are very much ahead of the curve, so thank you for sharing those ideas.
Thank you so much, Sharon, for leading the discussion. Thank you, Donald. Thank you, Mayor Bliss. We are going to wrap up this portion of the program with a conversation about creating pathways to service. We have California's Chief Service Officer, Josh Friday, member of the Governor's Cabinet in California, leading service, volunteer, and civic engagement efforts across the state, and of course, a New Deal leader when he was the mayor of his hometown in California. We also have Luke Bronin, the current mayor of Hartford, Connecticut, joining us. He took office in 2016, previously a deputy assistant secretary at the Department of Treasury during the Obama administration, and came on and led his city through its greatest fiscal crisis in its history. So we'll let them take it from here. Thank you, guys.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right. All right. Today and this afternoon, we get to talk about something that we are very, very passionate about, which is why we're here. And I know many of you are passionate about as well, which is the idea of service and national service. And it's not a new idea. This is an idea summit, but service is certainly not a new idea. The idea of calling on Americans to serve and step up and serve. But what may be new is the role that states and cities are playing in the national service movement. So we're very excited about having this opportunity today. I get to be here with a good friend, Mayor Bronin. We have a lot in common in addition to loving New Deal. We both are, he is a mayor. I had a chance to serve as a mayor. We are both veterans of perhaps the greatest branch, the United States Navy, go Navy. And we both are passionate about service. So today we get to talk about the role that the American Rescue Plan has played in really catalyzing the we heard of earlier, innovative pilots around this idea of how do we call on people to serve. And you, Mayor Bronin, had a chance to create a really exciting program in your city called the Youth Service Corps. We'll talk about, it's similar to what we've done in California, but maybe just start us off by talking about why you created the Youth Service Corps and what are you seeing from it?
Sure. Thanks, Josh. First of all, it's great to be here. I want to say huge thanks to the New Deal for everything, including bringing us all together and giving Josh and I the chance to talk about something that we're both passionate about. So when I took office in 2016, one of our first goals was to create our Hartford Youth Service Corps. And we built it because we saw a major gap in our youth development efforts, which was that we didn't have anything that was providing paid year-round work opportunity to young people who had fallen off track. And I want to talk about sort of each piece of that real quick. First, we wanted something that could reach those young people who really had fallen off track. You know, opportunity youth. It's 16 to 24. The overwhelming majority of young people in our Youth Service Corps have been DCF involved, justice involved, experienced profound housing insecurity, and in many cases had dropped out of school. It was not a first come, first serve. It was by referral only from those organizations or individuals in the community who said, this is a young person who needs some help getting back on track. But extraordinary young people who've got incredible talent and capability. And we wanted to make sure that we had both a carrot to get them engaged in this by paying minimum wage, but that's meaningful for a lot of these young people, in most cases earning their first paycheck year round, not a few weeks during the summer, but all the way around the year. Get that experience of earning the paycheck and feeling what that feels like, but at the same time doing work that actually makes a difference in the community and feeling like you are making a contribution to this community that so many young people unfortunately felt disconnected from and feel disconnected from. And at the same time, doing all of that while getting connected to incredible network of mentors and coaches who are helping those young people get ready for what's next, make a plan, whether that's going back to high school or getting a GED, whether it's going on to some type of post-secondary school, or whether it's going on to get a job. And you know, we've had great results there, but that's why we built it, so you could have reach the kids who weren't being reached, give them the experience of a paycheck, connect them to mentors, and make them feel like they were really making a difference in their community.
That's awesome. I first of all, round of applause for creating the Youth Service Corps in Hartford. So there's two concepts that I loved that you touched upon that I think it's worth diving deeper into. One is you started off by making it clear that this is a paid service opportunity. I find this in California. Even though I have the chance to be in a cabinet level position with the governor, and I run an organization called California Volunteers. So whenever anyone thinks about service, they think about volunteers. And I have to remind people that even though I volunteered to be in the military, I got paid, and it should be paid. That we should be investing in this work. And so that was the advantage of the American Rescue Plan, at least in California, is we knew we wanted to create service programs like you created in Hartford. And we knew we wanted to give more Californians the opportunity to serve. What the American Rescue Plan allowed us to do is to supercharge and build two special programs in California. One, like the Youth Service Corps, we call it in California the Youth Jobs Corps. It's $185 million that our governor and our legislature invested in creating the Youth Jobs Corps, which is to provide opportunities like Mayor Bronin created for young people that are low income, foster care, that have been involved, justice involved, that otherwise have a hard time getting into the workforce, giving them an opportunity to serve, to do something meaningful. And so we have them, and we've partnered in what's so exciting, I think, about this program, which is relevant to this community and to why we are so excited about and having this conversation with you all, is we partnered with our biggest cities in California and several counties to fund them to create this program. So this was very much a partnership between the state and local municipalities to create literally thousands of service positions. And these are positions where young people are working in food banks, they're tutoring and mentoring, they're taking climate action, doing a variety of environmental work. They're doing really meaningful work. And the second program is we created a program called the Californians for All College Corps. And here's the gist of this. We call this the California GI Bill. And here's the new deal that we create in California. If you're willing to serve while you're in school in California, then we're willing to give you $10,000 towards your education, which for a Pell Grant student is the amount that the gap that they have to come up with by either taking out loans, which is why we have a student debt crisis in this country, or by working. And so I had to, when I was in college as a Pell Grant recipient, had to work at a local golf course, washing golf carts. Now we have literally thousands of Californian students who are able to serve in their community, building social networks and social capital while we help them pay for college. And the new deal is that, and it's again, it's not a new idea. We have the GI Bill, but in California, because of the American Rescue Plan, where we've invested $127 million into the College Corps program, we are now providing debt-free pathways for our young people that's tied to service. And and maybe this is, I want to pass it back to you, Mayor Bronin. One of the things that we've heard from both of these programs, besides the economic value that's being provided, is a concept that you brought up, which is this idea of connection. When I talk to young people who say for the first time ever they feel connected to their communities, and I'm curious what you are seeing. Where do you see that connection take place, and where do you see the benefits of it?
I think that's a hugely important point, and I think it's been important for a long time. We've had so many people of all ages in our communities who are disconnected, our young people especially, and of course the pandemic made that terribly worse. And so that work, which was important before, I think is now vital to helping young people recover and heal and reconnect after everything they've been through. And we're seeing the same thing, that the young people who are part of this, who are part of a team doing that work, who are doing work that matters, and realizing that they can actually see a change in their lives as a result of that, creates that sense of connection. And we try to measure it in to the last conversation, we try to measure it too. And so of those kids who came into the Youth Service Corps out of school without a diploma or a GED, 84% of them went back to school or went back to get that GED. Of those who came into the Youth Service Corps who had a GED or a diploma, but they weren't working and they weren't in school, post-secondary, close to 70% went on to another degree or certification program, and also about 70%, 72% went on to unsubsidized employment afterwards. So it made a huge difference, but talking to the young people who are in this program, it absolutely helped create that sense of connection. And just to talk about the impact that can have, we're obviously working at vastly different scales, statewide in California and in the city of Hartford in Connecticut. But in Hartford, over the last 7 years, thousands of kids have now been part of this Youth Service Corps. It now represents about 1.5% of our city's population that has been part of the Youth Service Corps. And you think about what that means, for a community as a whole. It's real.
Yeah, it's real. And one of the things that we've seen in California is, I think it's the power of investing in these kinds of programs, is beyond the economic opportunity, like you say. We just saw a couple weeks ago, I don't know, does anyone see what the Surgeon General just declared? Literally declared a national health crisis around loneliness. That he called that one of the biggest health crises we have in our country. We're all seeing it in our communities. We're seeing the mental health crisis. We're seeing young people with a lack of hope and purpose. And the power, I think, of these service programs is that it's not just about a job. It's about a job of dignity. It's about a job of meaning. It's about a job of purpose. And so when we invest in them, at least what we're seeing in California, is it is providing that sense of hope. I was with a young person in Richmond, California, about a month ago, who is identified by the city as being most likely to either be killed or to kill somebody else, gang related. And I got to visit him when he was doing a project through our Youth Jobs Corps program where he was remodeling a home, a World War II home that was going to become the low-income housing for a family in Richmond. And what he said to me was, what was so powerful for him, what he was so grateful for, was he never believed, ever, that he would be able to do something positive for his community. He never believed that he was going to be able to contribute in a meaningful way. And this program gave him that opportunity. And we're seeing that across the state at scale. So I want to ask, because I think it's so important that we connect this idea of national service that many of us are passionate about to what it actually means down the ground. Why do you think it's so important for mayors, especially, to be doing this work around creating service opportunities?
Well, I think there's a whole bunch of reasons, but one, to do this work right, first of all, you got to do it with the right partners. You got to make sure that you're working with folks who are able to reach young people, to establish relationships of trust, to recruit people who are both talented and passionate about the work. And I think at the local level, that work can often be most effective because you know the community best. Pre ARPA, it was also the case that we didn't have resources coming down either from the feds or from the state to do it. And so if we were going to build it and see it in our community, we had to do it ourselves. And we did it at a time. We were in the midst of as was mentioned before, a historic fiscal crisis in the city when I came in. And so we raised all the funds for this privately at first. It was corporations, it was foundations, but we then seized the opportunity of the ARPA dollars to expand it and grow it. And that was important not just so that we could increase the numbers of kids in the Youth Service Corps, but also because we wanted to demonstrate that we had skin in the game, that we were committed to it and invested in it. And we hoped that we would start to get the camel's nose under the tent to try to get some sustained public support, because at the end of the day, to do this at scale requires that same level of funding. And I know you've done something very similar with ARPA dollars and other things in California, and I think you're trying to do the same thing. We'd love your thoughts on why use ARPA and what's the plan for moving beyond ARPA and making it sustainable.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is the American Rescue Plan, I think, allowed us to create programs that change the imagination of what's possible around service. And so now, between the Youth Jobs Corps program we've talked about and the College Corps program, we also created the country's first statewide climate corps, which now other states are starting to create their own climate corps, which is really exciting. The governor loves to point this out, but if you add up all the programs in California now that ARPA made possible, in California, we are actually larger than our country's marquee service program, the Peace Corps. And that's what was possible because of ARPA. And now the governor's proposed to make those funding sources ongoing, paid for out of the state general fund, because people have seen what's possible when you invest in these kinds of programs, and they've seen the impact all across the board. And it's very exciting. I think we wanted to see if we had question time for maybe one or two questions, but just really quickly before you, any advice for a mayor or a state legislator or local official who wants to create a service program?
The only advice would be that I think that there are people who see the power of this. And, if you don't have the resources, or if you've used your ARPA, but you still want to build it, I think there's an enormous amount of latent support out there in the private sector and in foundations to do this kind of work.
That's right. One question in the back.
Hello, Dorcia Pleers, Chief City Auditor in the City of Albany. This is upstate New York. Question about the program. Minimum wage, but do you also include any type of benefits outside of just salary? And then the other question, and I may have missed this, are the service opportunities specifically within government or through your private public partnerships? The youth or whomever is incorporated into these programs can work outside of state, city government.
Sure. So really quickly, so we've structured our program to allow flexibility. So minimum wage, which a little over $15 in California, up to, we have some cities who are paying $27 an hour through our program. We also allow up to 50% of the money that we provide to provide the wraparound resources that you talked about. Because the goal is to really launch a career for a young person, which we know whether that's housing or transportation or daycare, we have to provide those wraparound services. So that is built into our program. And then the work, which is I think why the local partnerships are so critical. The work actually largely gets done with nonprofit partners and community-based organizations in the community. So we provide a lot of flexibility, no for-profits, but we have a lot of our members serve either with the city or with the county directly. And then we have most of them serve with community-based organizations doing meaningful work. And I'll just say one of the benefits we've seen that we didn't honestly expect, but we're seeing it and it's exciting, is that a lot of our service members are ending up filling the gap that our cities are seeing in their workforce. So we're seeing a direct pipeline between serving to then working in the city or the county that they're being employed, which is, of course, exciting. It's a win-win for everybody.
And so the answer in Hartford is very similar to the answer in California. We, although for the most part, compensation is entirely in wages. I wish we could offer benefits, but we can't. We try to maximize the number of kids who can be in the program earning that paycheck. But because they've got that incredible support system, we're also trying to make sure that they're connected to the resources that are out there, right? Whether it is our Husky Medicaid program or other resources that whether it's housing, transportation, anything, making sure that we're taking that opportunity.
Any final words, Mayor, for anyone excited about creating national service in their city or state? Oh, do we have one more question? Well, maybe one more question, and then we'll get to final words.
My name is Jazz Lewis, delegate from Maryland. Thank you guys so much. We are starting down this service year in Maryland with our Governor Wes Moore, which we're really excited about. I promise you that Results for America did not ask me to do this, but I did have a question on how you guys are measuring impact. Like, it's great that a lot of these young folks are gaining experience with service. I started my career as a community organizer. I strongly believe in that. But is there any type of connection to measuring for impact to just make sure these young folks aren't spinning their wheels in organizations that aren't actually having an impact in those communities?
So, I mean, I cited those stats before, but those are really the core measures of success for us. We want young people coming into this youth service corps to come out either back in school, going on to more school, or in a job, or both. And those are our core measures. But a big part of that is making sure that as they're going through this year of work, they're making a plan for what comes next. That is one of the responsibilities of any corps member, and it's one of the responsibilities of the coaches, is to make sure that there is a plan that kid is putting in place, saying, this is the next step I want to take. And we found that's made a huge difference.
So for us, to your question, on our College Corps program, we actually built in using ARPA dollars evaluation from an organization called WestEd to actually study whether we are graduating students with less debt, whether they are having a good experience, what the impact they're having in their community. But also with all of these programs, we're creating not just the future workforce for our state, we're creating the future leaders of our state. So are we actually training our young people to be ready to work, to be ready to go in the world? Those are the kinds of things we are studying. For our Jobs Corps program, like in Hartford, we are tracking whether we're actually creating a pipeline to a new career. And someone just joined our team, a familiar face at New Deal, David Silver, who's in the back, who will be around, who has come on just to think about how do we take the thousands now of service members in California and ensure that they have a pipeline and a bridge to a job. And we're going to be tracking that and making sure that we're successful in that. And just in closing comments, and then I'll let the great Mayor of Hartford close us out. I would just want to say, one, it's an honor to be here, to be among friends. But our feeling is, and we want to be helpful in this from California, every state should have a College Corps program. That's how we should be dealing with the student debt crisis. We know the politics are great. We know that this is an American idea that resonates, and we can deal with the student debt crisis by tying it to service. Every city and state should have a youth service corps like they do in Hartford, and every state should have a climate corps. So if we can be helpful in talking to you about how to do that, how to build it, how to get started at a small level and then scale it from there, we would love to be in partnership with you all in creating this movement.
I would just echo that. And also on the last one, you mentioned, we were talking just before we got up here about what you guys are trying to do in Maryland, which is awesome. I'll finish on one plug, mostly in case any of the team is watching, and then to echo Josh. We were really excited this year. The National Youth Employment Coalition recognized the Hartford Youth Service Corps as the innovative program nationally in youth employment, and we were excited about that. One, because it helps us make the case for more resources to grow it, and two, because we want to see it replicated. We want to see it replicated in other cities in Connecticut, and we want to see it replicated around the country. And so, just like Josh, my team and I are willing to talk with anybody, anytime about how to do it, and also eager to learn how we can do it better, because that's a huge part of doing this work, is constantly looking in the mirror and saying, what are we not getting right yet, and how do we do it better?
Grateful to you all. Looking forward to the party and fun for the rest of the week. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Mic drop.
Great. Thank you so much, Josh, Mayor Bronin. My name is Ben Moore. I'm the Director of Leader Engagement for the New Deal. I'm so happy to be with so many friends, allies, familiar faces, and new friends here in Detroit. Before I let you know about some logistical information, I do just want to note that the last 3 conversations we heard have been highlighting some of the amazing diversity of programs that our leaders are implementing with federal funds. This is just a small subsection of the programs that our leaders have been able to envision and implement with these funds. If you're interested in learning more about what our leaders are doing with ARPA funds, please collect our ARPA handout from the registration desk and also visit our website. We've got a ton of material up there for you all to dig into if you want inspiration. One other logistical note before we get to breakout sessions, I do want to remind folks that are coming to dinner with us tonight that we have buses that will be taking folks directly to dinner from here. So I know that some folks got here directly from the airport, brought luggage here. You will please bring the luggage to the hotel before we get on our buses. We don't have space for the luggage at Michigan Central. If you need to miss the buses, you can find your own way to Michigan Central. It's a walk or a short drive. Okay, with that, on to breakout sessions. So we've got 3 amazing breakout sessions for you. I will go ahead and just read the session titles and also let you know where those are going to be held. So first, for those that selected our college and career readiness, ensuring access to high-quality career pathways for all students, that breakout session is going to be in the Bixby room just behind me where the lunch buffet was held. For those who selected the broadband access, preparing communities to leverage new funding to advance digital equity, that will be in the Foundry room, which is just through these doors behind the AV booth. You can also go out to the registration table and enter from over there. And lastly, for those who selected the transit-oriented development, achieving affordable housing and equitable transportation, this one's a little bit more tricky. We are going to be in the San Morello dining room, so you'll head out these doors, you'll take a right down the hallway to the bathroom, then there are some stairs. We'll have New Deal staff placed along the way to help direct you. You'll go down the stairs, and then you should run into New Deal staff down there. Last note, folks, we are trying to keep to a relatively tight schedule here, so breakouts will begin in 10 minutes. There are cookies in the breakout room, so please make your way quickly. Thank you.